Welcome to the Awake Space. I'm Laurie Rivers, your host, here to help you with some inspiration to get those aspirations out into the world. I know the world looks crazy, guys, and it's going to continue to look crazy for probably another 12 weeks, okay? It's just going to keep rolling. There is a gear shift in April, and I was talking about that with my patrons in my Saturday night check-in, and talking about this astrological aspect that's happening April 23rd, which is Venus conjunct Uranus on April 23rd. And it's really not making many aspects anywhere other than the moon. And the moon is in Cancer. And it's supporting that Venus conjunct Uranus. And it's some economic good news. And I was like, how the hell are we going to see economic good news? But it's there. Remember, as an astrologer, you don't see the how, okay? There might be people who blow smoke over time and say, oh, I see this and I see that. Reading a chart is like reading a book. Only you don't get all the dialogue, you don't get all the backstory. You have to have a good understanding of whatever subject matter you're looking at. If you're doing mundane, you have to understand politics, political science, geology. If you have an interest in weather, it's kind of like whatever your interests are, you can apply that knowledge as you're interpreting charts, okay? So as I look out towards April, I see a shift in the energy. We have more shifts that happen ahead of that. We have Neptune moving into Aries. We have Saturn moving into Aries. And we got a sneak peek of all of that back in the summer of 2025. The energy shifted dramatically. We have Neptune at 29 degrees of Pisces right now. That's a lot of smoke. That's a lot of fog. And there's confusion in that. Things will shift and we will have more clarity. Is the outcome going to be what you want it to be? That's up for grabs. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more here on the Awake Space podcast this week on episode 4 of season 7. As always, I'm going to give big shout outs to the community at the Awake Space for sponsoring this podcast. We do not take ad dollars. We do not accept corporate sponsorships. Why? I like to stay independent. And I think you want me to. So, here we go. Get your tea, get your coffee, get your matcha, get your Red Bull or your hot cocoa, your tea, whatever you're drinking, your H2O. Don't forget that. And whether we're going to work, whether we're dropping water on frozen pavement, whether we're taking a walk with the dog, putting the cat in the backpack, taking the kids to school, we're going to do it together. All right, guys, let's talk a little bit about how energy works when I'm talking about predictions, because too often I hear people reacting to what I'm talking about when I'm speaking about mundane, making it personal to you. And one of the biggest skills you can develop this year in 2026 is letting go of taking the news personally. I'm not saying don't have compassion. I'm not saying don't have empathy. But when they flood the zone with craziness, with egregious acts, with control, dominance, all the things we're seeing and have been seeing as we've moved through 2026 already. And as I record this, we're on the 18th. It was the new moon today, and it'll stay new for 3.5 days. Remember, if you're a patron, you have the moon phases video that teaches you all about how to use the energy of each moon phase. So it's new. You want to set your intentions. Even if you're listening to this on Monday or Tuesday of January 18th, 20th, even the 21st in the morning, you can set those intentions, okay? You can set those intentions that will mature on June 29th when the full moon in Capricorn happens. So let's talk about this a little bit more. Energy. If you can hold your consciousness steady, okay, and I'm not saying you have to hold it 100% of the time. That's impossible for any human being, regardless of how much practice they have in their lifetimes. The mundane is the collective, and all of us are part of it. There isn't a single person above the collective fray. We all get impacted by that collective energy. One of the reasons they're flooding the zone is to keep people off their footing, create instability. Because again, just like when you're in an abusive relationship, people will keep you off balance so they can stay in control. And the most important thing you can do is learn how to take a step back, even for a few minutes. It makes you much harder to control. So when I'm talking about what I see happening in the outer world, it doesn't necessarily mean that's happening directly to you. You personally can always have a good day, a good week, a good month, a good year. What I see going on in the outer world does indirectly impact almost all of us. It can directly impact us. How we manage through that energy is dependent on us, okay? And we can try to wish it away. We can try to spell it away. We can try to put our head under the covers, and that's never what I'm asking you to do. I'm not asking you to ignore it, but I am saying don't over-consume it. The doom scroll is horrendous for your mental wellness. It doesn't make you a better person. Notice how they take one story and they flood and flood and flood, and even in social media, because people are trying to get clicks and views, etc. You'll notice I don't tend to make content around what's going on directly on those news stories. And there's a reason for that. It doesn't mean I don't want to address the matter. It doesn't mean there's not something in me saying, I want to rage with them. Of course I do. There is egregious happenings going on in the world right now. There is uncalled for violence. Of course that makes me angry. And sometimes in the Patreon, you'll hear me as we do our live streams. I'm like, oh my God, gets me too. But I can't be of service if I'm getting picked up and thrown around in the collective energy. Emotions are contagious. Emotions are contagious. This was studied by Stanford University. You know, somebody discovered it serendipitously, a happy accident, and then they did a study on it. And this is why dictators and abusive people use fear to drive people underground, drive them into submission. Okay, so the people who navigate these types of times best are the people who can pause, step back from it. It doesn't make you a bad person to take a break and focus on what is in your immediate environment. And I talked about that in the Patron-only podcast this week. And you can find out, I went through the new moon intention setting guide as well. So if you're a patron, make sure you don't miss that. Check in with that. It's there. It's easy to be overwhelmed right now. It's easy for our nervous systems to get hyped up, and it's going to get more intense, and we'll all probably be feeling things a little bit more as we move towards the end of January. So once Aquarius season starts, and it starts this week, that conga line of Capricorn shifts into Aquarius over time, okay? And we'll talk a little bit about that in the next segment. When I'm talking about happenings in the outer world, it doesn't mean it's happening to you. If it's your birthday on one of those days, don't look at the news. Enjoy your day. Enjoy your day as much as possible, whether it's getting in the tub and taking a soak, making your favorite food, going out for a walk if you can. It depends on where you live and what the weather's going to be like. But you don't have to get caught up in the maelstrom. And this is what they don't want you to know. I'm not being mean or judgmental when I'm telling you, hold your consciousness. I'm trying to equip you with the tools necessary to navigate massive systemic change. I've talked about that for 5 years on this podcast. Massive systemic change doesn't start and stop in a day, a week, a month, a year. Massive systemic change means society is changing overall. The political structures are changing and will be changing. How we deal with our day-to-day, our supply chains change over time. It doesn't have to be bad change. We can make it good change when we focus on what we can do locally in our communities. I've been banging this drum for years and years, long before I ever had a podcast. Long before I ever had a podcast. As I go through the rest of the episode, I want you to really remember that mundane energy is not the same as the energy inside of you. Yes, it impacts us all to some degree. And yet, we all have agency and can determine how we move through these interesting times. And sometimes that means taking a break. Sometimes it means going to bed early. Sometimes it means playing a video game. Sometimes it means we do another session at the gym this week. Sometimes it means we're in stress baking. It is stressful. Change is stressful. Good change is stressful. Our brain doesn't know the difference, but our brain certainly does do what we tell it to, and that is neuroscience. I know it's hard right now. I know it's scary right now. I know it's uncertain right now. And then I look out at April 23rd and I'm like, I don't know what good thing is coming, but it is. And if you think it is it happening, you could be really wrong. That may not be it. I can't imagine how it's going to be good with it not happening, but I can't make a guarantee on that. Anybody who wants to go in with their full chest on that is getting clicks. You can't accurately determine that. Look, Mitch McConnell's still alive. If we went by pure astrology, he should have been a goner in 2022 and 2023. Modern medicine changes the game, and if we don't know how that modern medicine is being applied, and we don't have astrological signatures for that, we can't make that prediction. But something good is happening in April. And then there's another round of instability. So for some reason, the economics picks up, and then things get really interesting again once Uranus hits Gemini, when it moves into Gemini, and that happens in April. And then Mars conjuncts that July 3rd, which could make it a really interesting day. It could be a really good day. It could be a little stabby day. We'll find out. You may have been socialized to feel like you have no power. You may have been socialized to believe that there's nothing you can do to make a difference. You may have been socialized to feel like you need somebody else to pick you up and move you in the right direction. None of that is true. You have so much more power than you can imagine. But power isn't about physical violence. Power isn't about dominance and control. The people who believe that is power are the weakest people on the planet. The weakest, the most insecure. And it doesn't mean they don't do damage, but there's smarter ways to use our power. And one of the smartest ways is to get involved in our local space, whether it's just a couple of friends doing meal prep together, or going in on groceries together to get bulk purchases. Living well, living comfortably. I didn't say living large, living well in times of struggle is an act of resistance. There are so many ways to do it. And the social media right now, the bots are so active. Listen to the people with calm heads. They're not saying don't take action. They're saying be smart about the action you do take. And being smart about it is also not allowing yourself to be consumed by fear. It's okay to be afraid when things are scary, but being consumed by it to the point of paralysis, that means they win. Okay? So I'm going to give you a rundown in the next segment. I'm going to talk a little bit about the astrology coming up. But what I want you to do is remember, I'm talking about big outer world stuff. It doesn't mean that's what's happening to you. It's giving you a little bit of a heads up, a little way to prep for what's going to be coming at us on our screens so that you can pause, take a breath, and decide what's next for you. What's your logical next step? It doesn't make you unfeeling. It doesn't make you uncaring. It makes you effective. And on this day of the Capricorn new moon, well, I can't think of anything better than helping you be more effective in your day-to-day life. Let's get started. Let's talk about what's up this week. We already had Venus move into Aquarius on the 17th of 2026. We've got the sun ingressing into Aquarius on the 19th. That's Monday. And then on the 20th, we have Mercury ingressing into Aquarius. The 23rd, Mars ingresses into Aquarius. And on the 26th, which should be a pretty big day, we have Neptune moving into Aries, and where it's going to stay for the next 14 years. Wow. So we've got some interesting happenings coming up this week, and we shouldn't be surprised. It's already been a long year. So let's talk about what that means. Aquarius energy isn't without feeling. It can actually be just as passionate as its sister sign, Leo. Okay, and to me, when I see all of this, I see people hitting the streets. A lot of people have asked me, when is World War III? When is the Civil War? And I've said we've kind of been in both of them for quite a long time. They just aren't matching your idea of what that looks like. Doesn't mean that it is ever going to become what you think it looks like. Right now, we're in a trade war globally. And the European Union shot back at the United States and was like, tariff us, we're going to tariff you. We're not just going to tariff you on physical goods, we're going to tariff you on services. So they're going to be putting economic pressure on the United States. So we can expect things to get a little bumpy economically. And that means when I was talking about it in the last segment, pull together with your friends to go grocery shopping. Make a list. I used to do that when I had very little money. My friend and I, their household didn't have a lot either. We pooled our resources and we would buy in bulk together. And we would parcel things out for each other. So whatever we bought, we'd split it up and we'd portion it out. It's a good plan to do. And it's a good habit to be in regardless. And it's fun. You can make it fun. It doesn't have to be, times are hard and life sucks. And you keep telling yourself the story of suckage, it is going to suck more. Take it from somebody who has seen a fair share of struggle. You complain about the struggle and you're going to be on that struggle bus for a lot longer. Whereas if you can gamify it, if you can see the silver linings, count your blessings, you can move through challenging times with a lot more ease and grace. So again, the astrology, we've got Venus in Aquarius. That's empowering people. The 19th, we have the sun moving into Aquarius. And on the 20th, we have Mercury moving into Aquarius. That's going to be a little sharp. Mars moves into Aquarius, and the 26th, we have Neptune moving into Aries at long last. We'll be sick of that too in 14 years, but it's a breath of fresh air for right now. Let's take a look at some of the bigger dates this week for you to pay attention to energy-wise. So on the 19th, we also have Venus conjunct Pluto in Aquarius, as well as the Sun ingressing into Aquarius. And I think we'll see some big people power. There could be some big news stories, but they may be uplifting. We may see something that rallies our spirits. Okay. It may not last for a long, but on the 19th, we may see some rays of hope. And I get a lot of comments of like, people need to do something. People are doing something. People are showing up. People are being involved in their communities. Don't let your own sense of helplessness color your perception on how things are going. Because we are seeing more and more people globally showing up for what really matters. We could see some interesting things happen with transportation on the 20th. So if you commute, watch your weather, keep your eye out on the weather. I think there could be some pretty cold temperatures heading to a lot of places as we move into Aquarius season. So keep your eye on the weather. Make sure you got blankies and ways to cook your food. We have a preparation and cooking thread chat in the Patreon, in the Awake Space community, and we help each other that way. The 21st, we've got the Sun conjunct Mercury. It's a very, very communicative day. It's a very communicative day. And then on the 22nd, we've got Mercury conjunct Pluto and Mars sextile Neptune. That could be a big release of information. We could have more leaks. There could be something about the Epstein files that day. There could be some secrets revealed. There's some interesting things happening there. And then the 23rd is probably going to be a banger. There's probably some really big news, and it may be unpleasant, but it could be hopeful. Depends on your perspective. I can't speak on your behalf on how you're going to perceive that. She's going to be going live a lot in her community, it appears, because it's a really active week. But anyway, we got Mars moving into Aquarius and the Sun conjunct Pluto on the 23rd. So 21st, 22nd, 23rd, expect travel delays, expect some wild wind, wild weather, and we could see some stabby, cut that day. It could be very, very interesting. And it could be the people pushing back. It could be, but so far people have been really, really smart about not giving a reason. But if you live in Minnesota, I would be very, very cautious in how I did any kind of civil disobedience or community support. Okay, so just be aware. Because just because something is illegal doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Neptune moves into Aries on the 26th and the 27th. Mars is conjunct Pluto. And that's a day I'm looking out for. And we'll talk about that more in depth on next Monday's podcast. So you want to make sure you pop in for that. I'll be doing a deep dive for Awake Space Astrology magazine members and up in the Patreon ahead of that. So, because I think that's a real stabby kind of day. So what do you do with this? If you know there's going to be disruptive events, possible power outages, and it's not going to be everywhere. Like if I live in the middle of nowhere, I'm not all that concerned about some of the bigger outer world events. They're probably not going to touch my locality. Not right yet. But I am impacted by supply chain. I'm impacted by weather. And so you have to sift and sort and logically go, what is more likely where I live? What is more likely? It doesn't mean it'll never happen. But in the moment, this is where I'm at. This is what's going on. You still have your day-to-day life. You know, you've got your work in the world. You've got your family. You've got your roommates. You've got whatever relationships, your fur babies or your feathered friends, right? Keep on track with their food. You know, make sure you have extra just in case of supply chain. I think there'll be more supply chain disruptions in February than in January. Make sure you keep up on their stock of your pantry. You don't have to buy tons and tons. Buy a little bit extra at the grocery store every time you go. That'll help. It isn't meant to be easy right now. It isn't meant to be a fairy tale. And with Neptune moving into Aries, it's about to dispel all of the fairy tales. And the one thing you have to be worried about with Neptune, and worried might be the wrong word, but is your own self-delusions. And you know what your biggest delusions are? That you're not up to this, that you're not strong enough, that you're not smart enough, that you don't have enough confidence, that you are too little, you're too small for this. And that's because when we studied history, the only thing we studied were the people who made the grand gestures or did the big bold acts. Very rarely in most people's historical study, especially in K through 12, did we learn about the average everyday person who had to live through shit. Like your grandparents, your great-grandparents, your great-great-grandparents, your on and on and on, all the begats. Humanity has never had a golden age. We have never had a time where everything was working smoothly. Not one time. Not one time. And I realize not everybody has families who tell stories. Some people's families maybe went through a lot and they didn't want to talk about it. They struggled so hard. It was a off-the-table subject. So you don't have that ancestral knowledge of this is what we did when the well went dry. This is what we did when all the chickens died. This is what we did when the soldiers came through. But I can guarantee you, it's there. And some of the fear, the collective fear that's up, is generational. Almost all of us come from families who survived famines and war and different kinds of abuse. And in that are survival skills. It's not just the wound. And I'm not saying it's not important to deal with the wounds. It is, but one of the ways you heal the wounds is finding solutions. What works for you? What works for you? Being shut down, it doesn't work for you. It makes it hard to function. And I'm not just speaking from theory. I've lived a really interesting life. Sometimes it's easy to hold on to what we wish was happening or what might happen or the potential instead of looking at our reality in the current moment because it hurts. It hurts to feel betrayed. It hurts to feel lied to. It hurts to see that the messages we grew up with were basically fart gas. It hurts. We feel like we were duped. Because we were. And maybe we weren't duped intentionally. Maybe there were people who really believed in that vision. And sometimes we just have to look at the mess and the wreckage around us and say, what's useful from here? I learned that when I lived in the Ivory Coast in 1990 and 91. I was working for a multinational corporation. I was just out of college. I was really young. I was 21 years old, which is really young. And one of the things, as I was wandering around, and I'm not going to talk about the civil unrest and the gunshots and all that fun stuff, but one of the things I marveled at as I walked through the markets is watching people take old tires that had been patched and patched and patched until they were no longer usable and turning them into flip-flops. It was the ultimate upcycling, repurposing things. And they were really cool flip-flops. Watching people take what other people thought was garbage and turning it into a useful object. These were people who had not a lot. These were people who had been oppressed and suppressed, and they still had to get through their day. And I learned a lot from that. I was like, okay, there's never a reason to sit on the fainting couch and wish myself not here because things got inconvenient or things got hard. I think of young Matthew. He was a young boy. He was maybe 10 years old. in Abidjan, Ivory Coast. And a couple times a week, I would go into the city because I lived in the equivalent of a suburb. And I would go into the city and I would work in a cafe, do my paperwork, have a really good cappuccino, and have a pain au chocolat. Okay, pain au chocolat, the chocolate croissant, right? And I would get an extra because there was this little boy who would fight the big boys to get taxis for business people. And you tip him. And that kid was agile. He was smart. And most of the people doing that, getting the taxis and what have you for the business people, they were older boys. They were teenagers, if not young men. Here was this little guy, eyes as bright as the sky, so smart and tough. And he got my attention one day, and I was taking home an extra pain au chocolat because I wanted to eat it later. And I looked at this little guy, and he didn't get much. He wasn't overly skinny, so I figured he was pretty successful at what he did because he was very healthy looking. But besides the money that I gave as the tip for getting the cab that first time, I gave him the pain au chocolat. And I watched this kid who would really have to physically keep himself safe from these bigger boys turn into the 10-year-old he was. A little treat. A little treat. And I did it week after week after week after that, to watch him just have that moment of delight. Moment of delight. And the way he treasured it. Because it was a sweet spot in a shitty situation. And it doesn't sound like a lot. But imagine being 10 and have to fight for your survival and getting a little sweet treat. Getting to be a child for a moment. Now, I hadn't studied resiliency studies yet. That didn't come till about 10 years later. But once I did, I realized that by being that person who saw value in him and giving him a little thank you and some care and seeing him as a human being, that hopefully gave him more. I don't know what happened to him. I don't even know if he's still alive. I sure as hell hope he is, and I hope he's happy. I think of him a lot. I think of that little boy. I bring this up because the people who thrive in uncertain circumstances make the most of what is available. They don't sit and count their losses. And this is so important to remember as we move through this week, because there's going to be some weird stuff come up. And if you allow them, and who do I mean by them? The powers that be, the media, the politicians, the so-called leadership. If you allow them to rob you of the simplest joy, you let them win. We've got Venus in Aquarius. Now is the time to look at people with actual love. Now is the time to lean into your quirks. Now is the time to lean into things that mentally stimulate you. Now is the time to have a different outlook and revel in it. Because this week is an interesting week, and they're going to come at us out of left field. They're going to double down on their dastardly deeds. Look at them like Snidely Whiplash. And think like the French Resistance, not the Revolution. And do it with a sense of the absurd. because we're going to see some really good stuff this week too, as crazy and egregiously crazy as some of the things we're going to see. We will also see people standing together. And again, we'll talk about that Mars conjunct Pluto next Monday, and you don't want to miss that. All right, let's do some patron shout outs, and then we will wind up this episode with a little bit more of what you can do to have a great day, a great week, a great month as we wind up January and we go through some of these crazy, crazy days. All right, every single week we welcome our newest members, and they help make this podcast possible. So, if you want to join, now's the time, because I go live a lot in Patreon. I help people navigate these crazy times. I hold a lot of space and a lot of energy. Not to make things feel better, but to remind you of your agency. So we've got Faye, Jamie, Ray, Karen, Nicole, MW, Nona, Cassie, Lainey, Lorraine, Sarah, Jay, Laura, Aaron, Rachel, Ava, Rita, Kat, Sivim says, that's really cute. Brittany, Jill, Mary, Erica, Julie, Kristen, Troy, Terry the Basset Hound Lady, Shannon, Crystal, Mari, or Mary. Mary, it is not the Mari. We had that explained, but Mary with an I. Misty, Jaleel, No Way Jose, Joyce, Stephanie, Jillian, Robin, Honey, Leighton Dream, Jay Mintz, Jess, Jackie, Sierra, Avian Onslaught, Desiree, DB, Bristol, Jennifer, Poem, Natalie, Catherine Marie, Neptune Loon, Beam, Laura, Ariana, Izzy, Kim, Witches and Britches, Mama Saurus, What Up Though, Pablo, Hillary, Cynthia, HB, Alexia, Nick, Amber, Ryan, Vermicelli, Melissa, Martins ×2, Mariah, Sasha, Jackie, Izzy, Andrea, Nat, Alexis, Kim, and Ashley. Thank you so much for being our newest members. All right, let's get on with the rest of the show. So how do you get through all this? You know, how do you get through all this? It's not enough to intellectualize it. I can tell you that much. It's not enough to know things can and will get better, that nothing lasts forever, that pendulums swing. You know, that's one thing. But how do you do it? And one thing I can tell you from having survived some very interesting times, you do it one step at a time, one moment at a time. And you stay as focused on what is happening right around you as you can. What is my actual reality? What is actually happening for me? What is actually going on in my life? What do I want to keep the same in my own personal life? And what maybe do I need to change? Because with all that energy coming into Aquarius, that's the time to change. Aquarius is the great disruptor energy, and disruption isn't always bad. Everything we use currently disrupted a reality. Whether we're using computers or cell phones, whether we're driving cars, going in airplanes, using an engine in a boat, using any kind of vehicle with wheels, they all disrupted a reality when there was an invention. We can be more inventive in our personal lives. We can switch things up a little bit. If we always do this certain thing, it might be time for a little change. Try a new recipe. Try a new food. Try a new way of organizing, both locally and in our personal lives. Hell, organize your closet differently. This is the time to shake things up deliberately. Deliberately. Maybe it's time to be a little more social, probably with all that Aquarius energy. Maybe it's time to get to know your neighbor. Maybe it's time, if you have always been the volunteer everybody relies on, to take a step back and take care of you. Because other people, they will either show up or they will not. But it's not all on you to make it okay. I'm going to repeat that. It's not all on you to make it okay. Carrying the world's problems on your shoulders is just going to give you a bad back. And that's really important to remember. As we move through this week, as we feel the energy change, pay attention to it so you can feel it. Because you will. You'll feel it if you tune in. Our mental energy is going to become faster after the 20th. Okay? Because Mercury moves into Aquarius. It's an air sign. It's sharp. It's not mechanical per se, but it's process-oriented. Process switches up. Mars moving into Aquarius is very sharp energy. It's collaborative, though. Because remember, Mars is always action. You do better when you have somebody to bounce ideas off of. Sometimes people more like push against existing status quo, but there needs to be some kind of interplay. This is a really good time to retool things in your life. If something isn't working, you could do something about it with that energy. I'm giving you a pep talk because I know there's going to be some interesting things that show up. And if you're a patron, you're going to see that in the What's in the Headline segment. Magazine and Up gets it on usually Sunday night anymore. And then it goes out to $5 members on Tuesdays. But for you watching this or listening to this podcast episode, understand this energy is great for shifting things up that no longer serve you well. It's not enough to let go of it. Let go of it. People say let go of it. It's hard to let go of things. It is. It's hard to let go of hurts. It's hard to let go of feeling disillusioned. It's hard to let go of your wounding. Maybe we're not supposed to let it go. Maybe we have to transmute it. Maybe we need to turn that energy into something productive. Because if we just sit on the couch feeling powerless, it doesn't serve anyone, including ourselves. Like I said to my patrons, when I am concerned or worried or overwhelmed, I'll go live. Because the thing that will shift me most is being of service. Holding space and energy for people. Creating a soothing container. Not to make you falsely soothed. Not denying the current reality. But just saying we can be in this storm together. And look at us being okay for an hour or two. That's how we make it through this week. This is how we make it through the uncertainty. This is how we make it through massive systemic change. And for those of you who joined the Mystery School and up, because we've got some really cool stuff coming up with Laurie's Lab, it is the laboratory for you. The laboratory. I know it's laboratory, but it's so much more fun to say laboratory. Anyway, it is the space for you to be able to practice the tools that I've created, including the VISE system called Core 12. And it helps you identify where you're at consciously and then deliberately make a choice about how you want to be in the world. Okay? It is how you wield your consciousness on purpose. And it's the core is 12, not steps, but 12 parts of the methodology. that help you embody this understanding of being in charge of your own consciousness. And then we look at planning projects, and then we look at, getting the outlines done. And then we look at how we choose to live our lives forward with different modules where it's financial, like healing the money wound, creating a side gig, things like that. But it is the foundational tool and the work that everybody talks about, because everybody talks about doing the work and they never tell you what the work is. So I've created a process and a container and worked my tuchus off over the last week. My eyeballs are about to fall out of my head. But I got all of that done. I'll be recording this week, and I'm very, very excited. So if you're in the Patreon, you'll be getting a link and a code. I put a post out for those of you who are members at that level, just kind of giving you a heads up. It's happening. I know sometimes I get quiet in the Patreon. I still go live a couple times a week. Part of that quietness is that's when my head is down and I'm writing and I'm working, and there you go. Support one another. Find people in your area. I know you might feel like a blue dot and a sea of red, but I have read for so many people that feel that way. And I'll be like, well, I read for 5 or 6 other people in the last week who live where you live, and they're blue dots too. I think you've isolated yourselves to your own disadvantage. Use this Aquarius energy coming up this week to start finding your neighbors who may be a lot more on the same page than you think. Because now is not the time to be isolated and silent. All right. I hope you have a really great week. If you've got questions about anything I talked about here in the podcast, feel free to leave them in the comments, and I'll address them next week.